Today I will be making no friends as I take the side of someone who many don't even consider to be human. Many people think he's a robot, an android, or even a lizard person. Yes, that's right. I'm making an argument for Mark Zuckerberg. Not because I like Mark Zuckerberg as a person. I don't like or dislike him. I don't know him at all. But because what he is doing at Facebook, at Meta, for their build out is absolutely the most logical thing to do for anyone that would be in his position. And of course, when the news was announced the other day that they were talking about getting into selling off excess compute, you had Ed Zitron come out, well-known doom and gloomer, who's starting to join the lamestream media, and we all know what that means. Whenever someone gets into the lamestream media, we know that means they had to compromise their integrity. It's the only way you can join the big boys club, right? You have to completely sell your soul. But congrats to Ed, he's getting to that table. So he went out there and he just made up all this stuff, put some tears in his eyes, said how fearful he was. Look, this is what I feared was gonna happen. Okay, it was all a bunch of BS. But anyways, an Ed fanboy comes on. Oh, welcome to Ruben Tech. We meet at the intersection of tech and finance. Please be sure to like and subscribe down below. So Ed fanboy comes on, and this one actually didn't just cry and yell and scream. He actually tried to leave a somewhat decent argument, so I want to address it. M. Granich 948 writes, Ed is making a point that all of the hyperscalers are overbuilding, and you're not presenting any arguments against that conclusion. You're criticizing Ed's interpretation of what Zuck said, but here's one argument on Ed's side. Now, before we get into that argument, I just want to be clear about something here. Ed is not the only person saying that the hyperscalers might be overbuilding. I've been saying that forever. Mark Zuckerberg said that at his shareholder meeting. Everybody knows that. However, Ed's not telling you why they are doing such. Okay? That's the problem with his integrity. He tells you falsely that AI is losing tons of money. He's not telling you the truth there. As I've demonstrated time and time again, they are chasing a fire hose, a literal fire hose of cash spewing out in the API inferencing market, where margins are like 90%, possibly even higher. Okay? So if Ed was just saying that, I would have no problem with that. It's when he goes out and he adds all the other stuff, like AI doesn't make money, nobody's using AI. That's the problem, okay? Is it possible they're overbuilding? Yes, absolutely. I've said that many times. Okay, I've given my hot dog cart analogy, which I will give later, but let's get into the rest of this statement. You're criticizing Ed's interpretation of what Zuck said, but here's one argument on Ed's side. The build out of the hyperscalers is based on not one, but two assumptions. AI use by the nation will continue to grow exponentially. Customers will be willing to pay trillions of dollars needed for the hyperscalers to recoup their cost, their $1 trillion investment, made using loans and bonds. Okay, let me re-say that. My screen for some reason went off. Customers will be willing to pay trillions of dollars needed for the hyperscalers to recoup their $1 trillion investments made using loans and bonds. Chinese open source models are now within 1 to 2% of leading edge OpenAI Anthropic LLMs, and they are 5 to 20 times cheaper to run. If most end users end up using Chinese LLMs, the current build out may be 5 to 20 larger than what's needed, even assuming exponential growth. We're also finding out that customers of OpenAI Anthropic can't actually afford to pay for AI. And 80% of US AI startups are using Chinese open source models. All of the hyperscalers are building not based on demand, but on projected future demand. After spending 50% to build a data center, will they stop after spending? That doesn't make sense. It takes 3 to 4 years to build a data center. If they were to stop new data centers, they will have spent $1 trillion. There's a lot there. Let's go through this, okay? First of all, the build out based on two assumptions: that AI use by the nation grows exponentially and that customers will be willing to pay trillions of dollars needed for the hyperscalers to recoup their $1 trillion investment. made using loans and bonds. There's a lot in there. First, let's just talk about something. There's a very crystal, how do I want to put this? There's something that he's missing that's extremely obvious that Ed doesn't talk about either. And I talk about all the time. Now, first, you notice, because this is an Ed Zitron, this is an Ed Zitron disciple. He's never talking about Alphabet and rarely talks about Meta. Alphabet and Meta have extremely different reasons for getting into AI than the rest of these people, such as the AI Frontier Labs. You see, they have a product base right now that is under threat from AI. So another reason that they are doing this is what's known in the investment world as defensive Capex. Okay? I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that term, but it's the idea that you have a moat in some area and you are going to spend money perhaps in a way that other people wouldn't say is unnecessary, but you're doing it to spend it because you know that it's going to protect your moat. And the perfect example of this, again, as I've stated many times on my channel, is Google with what they did with Google Fiber. Google did not want to get into the fiber business because they're like, hey, we're going to lay fiber all across the country. Absolutely not. Google realized that the more people are online in general, the more money they make. The faster that people's online connections are working, the more money Google makes because of the scale of their services. 13 products with 1 billion plus users, 5 products of which have 3 billion plus. When you're online, Google makes money indirectly or directly. Maybe it's not from you, but they're tied to people's online usage. There's a direct correlation. So they spent this money, this defensive Capex, going into fiber, and they were crystal clear about why they didn't. They weren't shy. They said, we are going to force all of the cable providers, all of the internet providers, ISPs, to up their game. And guess what? They did. Certainly, shortly after Google announced their 1 gig service, all of a sudden, AT&T, Comcast, and all these other people had to respond. Google went into that industry to give them a kick into the rear. And you see, when you make the kind of money that they make, when you have the kind of profit margins they have, when you have the cash flow that they have, you can look at that and say, hey, you know what? I want to spend this money in order to protect what I have, to enhance what I have. They weren't in it to make money on Google Fiber directly. So if you're an Ed Zitron or Ed Zitron disciple, you say, gosh, this was a terrible move by Google. They lost billions of dollars. Oh, this is terrible. But if you had a brain, you would say, wow, this is brilliant. Google makes more money when people are online, and the faster they're online, the quicker they're getting served, the more money they make. So they're forcing the industry to catch up. Small price to pay. Google pays Apple $20 billion, as last we know, to be the default search engine on iOS. Okay, this is another defensive measure. This protects their moat. They had a similar agreement with Samsung, though not quite for as much money. So when it comes to AI and your Google and your Facebook, and you have product lines that absolutely could be disrupted by AI, and I don't care who you are, unless your head is literally in the sand, if you don't think that the products that they have, search, social media, etc., Instagram, aren't under attack by AI, then you have no brain. Just turn off the channel right now. I don't even want to hear from you. I don't want you watching this. Okay? We'll never agree on anything in life. So when they're looking at this, they're not just looking at it as he's writing. They're looking at it from defensive reasons. Existential crisis. They have to ensure that they are in play if something happens with AI that's unforeseen. If somebody else hits something, the next AI version of Instagram, Zuck has to make sure that his Instagram can still compete. And this isn't rocket science. Zuck has said this directly. Okay? So it's not just these two things that people are writing down here. Do they obviously want to prepare in case AI demand, it blows up like nobody's seen, Of course they do. As I've told you on this channel, and I keep showing to you, AI inferencing has a 90% margin. 90% for like cheap GPT 5.5. Doesn't mean everybody has 90%, but that one does. They charge $180. At most, they're paying $18 for those tokens. Okay? I highly doubt they're even paying that. And that's with Capex included on the servers. The margins that they're seeing there, everybody wants those. When you see margins like that, everyone's going to chase it. And they're not explaining that fully enough. They're not explaining that. And this is why the frontier labs are in it so hard. You're talking about a potential that has never been seen before. Nobody knows what the demand is going to be. Okay? Nobody. But the whole thing is everybody's anticipating that they don't want to be caught with their pants down if it turns out to be more than what's expected. Now, I've stated many times on this channel that is a huge risk for the frontier labs. But it's not a risk for Alphabet and Meta, which this guy and Ed Zitron never state. If you are OpenAI, if you are Anthropic, if demand falls short, you are in big trouble. Yes. Okay? Why? Because you won't be able to pay off your Capex. And you don't have anything else. You don't have other product lines. You don't have other revenue. But this is not the case for Alphabet or Meta or the cloud providers who are actually doing most of the spending. As Mark Zuckerberg said clearly, with this build out, every dollar that they put into AI for advertising purpose, i.e. their advertising tools, they have a definitive return on. Do you know what that means? It means that he knows exactly what they're going to make, and they don't even know what the limit of that is. You see, AI makes tons of money already for Google and for Mark Zuckerberg because they're using it in their ad space, and that's why their margins keep getting fatter and fatter over there. And so Mark's saying, well, first, if we are building out, then we can take some of this and throw it into our ad space where we know we can generate X amount of percentage because we're not even close. You might say, well, why aren't they going after that? Because again, he wants to have that capacity ready to deploy if things get out of hand with AI, i.e. there's a huge demand, if AGI comes, etc., etc. He wants to be prepared. Google's doing the same thing. They're sacrificing some dollars now in order to capture the market later. So, that was the first thing he said. Second thing he said, they have other uses within Meta, i.e. Meta is still growing quite a bit and they can use that AI within their own products. And then lastly, he stated, We also have external demand. People are always asking us about just buying straight compute. And of course that makes sense for him to get into that business, just like AWS, just like Microsoft, and just like Google found out 15 years. Doing something called eating your own dog food, i.e. Cannibalizing your own compute, right? Eating off of that, and then selling the rest to other people is an absolutely brilliant strategy. Yes, there's idiots on the market that are like, it'll lower their profit margin, but they'll have more revenue, they'll have more profit, they'll have higher great NOI. It's good for business. Okay, part 2. Customers will be willing to pay trillions of dollars needed for hyperscalers to recoup their trillion-dollar investment made using loans and bonds. First, let's talk about that again. This is a little bit different. Once again, I'm not going to talk about the frontier labs. This does apply to them. They need, as I've stated on this channel 100 times, frontier labs absolutely need that demand to appear. But AI doesn't. Google and Facebook, again, these dollars are looked at differently. I'm going to give you an example. Think of it like this. Before this build out, Google was stacking cash. They were stacking so much cash along with Apple. There was one point where they had $160 billion in cash and securities. And I think Apple at the time had 180. So cash and cash equivalents, right? So that's just stuff that's basically liquid. They had it just sitting there. And guess what Wall Street said? Why aren't you doing something with that money? Every single day I would read the reports of why it was so terrible they weren't doing something with that money. And now they're doing something with that money, and everyone's like, why are you doing something with that money? And this is why you don't listen to the Edzitrons and the Wall Street peons if you're running a $1 trillion corporation, because they don't know their asses from a hole in the ground. All they do is run around and say, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, every single freaking day. When you have that type of money, it's probably best to invest it into something that's going to pay off for your business. Ask Microsoft. When they bought Minecraft, people were like, how are they going to get that price back for Minecraft? But those people didn't understand. Microsoft had $100 billion in cash and cash equivalents just sitting there, doing nothing. So what does it get? Maybe they're getting government bond yield on it, 4 or 5%. So all they got to do is deploy it into anything else that pays them better than 4 to 5% and is better than them sitting in cash and cash equivalents. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay? So when you say this, it's not that they need to have a direct, of course they're hoping for a direct return on all of this. But there's defensive capex. There's the fact that the capex can go towards their currently producing, well-producing cash flow product lines. And there's also the assumption that as long as it is generating some return, right, it's probably better than it just sitting on the balance sheet doing nothing overseas. The last part of that, made using loans and bonds. Here's the biggest thing that differentiates this build out from the 2000 dot-com bubble. The 2000 dot-com bubble was a handful of companies who did not have cash flow, who did not have positive NOIs, investing and borrowing billions of dollars that they did not have. I don't know how many more times I can say this. Apple, I don't want to say Apple, they're not building out for AI. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Meta, These are like 4 of the top 7 cash flowing companies on earth. In fact, Google last year, the only company that cash flowed better was Nvidia. This is not some small-ish ISP, going out and issuing junk bonds for a build out. This is a company that I believe they cash flowed at like $100 and some billion. They had over $130 billion in net operating income. They cash flowed at well over $100 billion last year. So if you're going to sit there and you're going to talk about this, you have to understand these companies have rock solid balance sheets. Microsoft and Google, I believe they're like positive 300 on the asset side, 300 billion. When Google went to the bond market, they had no problem. They basically raised funds at like the same rate that the US government does, which has one of the highest ratings in the entire world. Somehow, don't ask me how. They were able to issue a 100-year bond and people bought it. They offered, what is it, 80 billion? 75 billion. 75 billion in stocks just the other week. They sold off that in stocks to raise capital. And Mr. Fundamentals himself, Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway, led the round and buying that stock in that fundraising. For all you out there, Mr. Fundamentals himself led the round. So when you say this, the implication Ed's trying to give you there is the 2000 .com bubble. This is nothing like that. We have companies. Google still has 100 billion just sitting on the books in cash. They finally started hopefully they'll actually halt their stock buyback. I find it weird that they're still buying back tens of billions of stock and then they're issuing out. It's one of these weird accounting things. They pay billions of dollars in dividends. These are not cash-starved companies. These are some of the most profitable companies that the earth has ever seen. Google, technically, before Nvidia, Google was the most profitable company this world has ever seen, bar none. Nvidia, I believe, took it away last fiscal year. And Google was second. So you guys are acting like this is companies like with zero cash. You're acting like this is like Tesla. Okay? These are companies whose balance sheets look like fortresses. Okay? But what about OpenAI? What about Anthropic? Yes, I've said that a million times. Go watch my videos. They're the ones that could fail. If there's a bubble, they're going to be in trouble. Obviously. Not AI. Where are we? Chinese open source models are now within 1% to 2% of leading edge OpenAI Anthropic LLMs. That's not true. The Chinese are extremely close. But as DeepSeek flat out admitted in their research, their model right now for releasing these models is they take our best models in America, they distill them, then they go ahead, they improve the efficiency of them, and they release that knowledge back through open source. That is their effort, is to commoditize the space. But to say that they're within 1% to 2% is not true. They are very close. Absolutely. This is not a knock against the Chinese AI. They're extremely close. But you can't pretend. We have to speak in reality here. DeepSeek made this known. They didn't hide it. And why should they? America started a war with China, a technological war. So why should DeepSeek hide what they're doing? All's fair in love and war. So they wrote right in their paper, yeah, we're using distillation. Why not? Let the Americans spend the money. But I'm not bringing this up because it's a big deal, because I think what they're doing is bad or something. I don't. I'm bringing it up because through distillation, you cannot release a better model. That's not possible. You have to understand how it works. Okay? And besides, they're paying the world back through efficiency. They're open sourcing all these. They just released, DeepSeek just released another, what was it? I forgot what it was. It was another efficiency improvement. Anyways, I'll make a video about it. It was actually pretty amazing, the paper. They just open sourced that. I think it was earlier this week or maybe it was last week. Okay? So if we're saying that about Chinese LLMs, we just got to be crystal clear. It's not that close. They're close. They're close. But they're not going to pass us until they decide to start doing the pre-train on their own, i.e. they got to do the first phase on their own. And right now they see no reason to do that. They're like, let the Americans spend all that money because that's where the biggest money is. And I think that's probably the best thing to do for them. Let OpenAI spend that. Let Anthropic spend that. I don't know. You let me know what you think. Where are we? The current build out may be 5 to 20% larger than what's needed. Nobody knows. Nobody knows at all. Okay, this is the thing I want to say. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Maybe it's 100 times larger than what's needed. Maybe it's 100 times less than what's needed. Nobody has any real idea. All we know right now is, despite what Ed tells you, the demand right now is through the roof. Okay? Despite what Ed and all the doomsayers say. How do I know that? Well, we just heard Google to Meta, a paying company, giving them billions of dollars through their Gemini API. Wasn't the contracted amount. This was the amount above the contracted amount, where they just go through the API like you and I. Had to cap them because they don't have enough compute, and they need that compute for their own products. So if the demand wasn't there, how come they can't serve enough demand? Who is one of, if not the largest infrastructure providers in the entire earth? So that's where we're at right now. Now the future, we don't know. It's possible. Okay, just like I said. We don't know, but we do know right now. I've done videos on here where I've showed you I'm accessing Gemini, I'm accessing DeepSeek, I accessed the Xiaomi API that one day. And where none of those companies, it's not every time, but there's times, so I showed you on those days, that their APIs are not available. Getting 503 errors, too many requests, and you're telling me that the demand's not there? Come on, people. Do you know what a 503 is? I mean, come on. We just got to drop this nonsense. We got to get back to reality. Okay? Is it possible in the future? Yeah. But like Mark said, if AI hits, what do you think his investors are going to say if he doesn't do the build out and he just sits on the cash? You think they're going to be happy in 5 years if he has 140 billion on the balance sheets or 180 billion on the balance sheets? He didn't build out. AGI hits and Instagram and Facebook get wiped out. What do you think the investors are going to say? Oh, he's an idiot. Oh, that's why you don't listen to these people if you're Mark Zuckerberg, if you these guys, because they're idiots. All they're doing is, no matter what you do, they're going to criticize it. They're going to criticize you, what you do, no matter what. And so he knows that this is an existential threat for him. And he's like, yeah, we have the funds. We can do this build out easily. Look at our cash flow. Look at what we make. This is not a big deal. And we have uses for it. Here's all these different things we can do with it. I mean, it's nuts. We're also finding out customers of OpenAI and Anthropic can't actually afford to pay for AI. That is BS. All these people say this stuff, but how do we know this is BS? And Econ 101, when you guys took it, you remember there's a simple law in Econ 101. It's one of the best laws in the world. You can somehow manipulate it for a little bit of time, but not too long. It's called the law of supply and demand, and it remains undefeated. And so if what you were saying is true and people couldn't afford it and there's no demand, then it would not be possible for OpenAI to keep raising prices, which they are. Simply put, would not be possible. It would break the law of supply and demand. They would have already broken, but they haven't. OpenAI keeps raising rates. And as you've heard on this channel, I have complained many times because I personally want the commoditization of AI. If OpenAI and Anthropic failed, which I don't think they will, but they could, but if they did, wouldn't it bug me? Because I want the commoditization of AI. I want AI to be as cheap as possible. Okay? And now I think of my friend, not my friend, the guy who wrote that comment yesterday, and I'm like, God, all I'm talking about is my bottom line here. It's awful. It's also for the good of humanity too. Okay, so I'll throw that in there. So if that was true, then OpenAI would be lowering their prices, and they're not. Okay, so something's either got to be wrong. Either the law of supply and demand is wrong, or Ed's right, and this guy's right. Right? Yeah. Not what's happening. And plus, we actually know that Chinese firms are spending billions. This was a kick to the groin for me. Chinese firms, China, I look to. I'm hoping they save us because they are pushing the commoditization of AI. Google and Facebook would be absolutely fine with the commoditization of AI. In fact, Facebook at first was all in on the commoditization of AI, and now they've joined the latter group. But they would be fine with it. But China's the one pushing it. So I'm all for China. I'm rooting hard for China because I want them to commoditize AI. But then I hear the report from the US government, because all the China hawks have to know from Microsoft how much China's spending on their cloud, on OpenAI, and it's billions of dollars. And you might say, but that's the distillation you talked about. Nope, sorry, distillation doesn't cost that much. Distillation is actually pretty cheap. No, it turns out that like everybody else that uses Chinese models, they'll use OpenAI and the Anthropic for their harder, more difficult problems because it isn't a 1% to 2% gap. It's a larger gap than that. And when you have a more difficult problem, you're willing to pay a premium. I'm not willing, but a lot of businesses are, and even Chinese businesses, and they're spending billions on AI. And so you can imagine that American companies are spending billions on it. All the hyperscalers are building not based on demand, but are projected future demand. Of course, let me give you my famous hot dog cart analogy. This comment right here shows that this guy has no idea how business works. For some reason, I land in a mythical town, Zoo York, and it's like the sister city to New York, except for that nobody there has ever had a hot dog. And I go to the Zoo York Tankies, and I buy a hot dog cart for $10,000, and I pay the Tankies $5,000 for the right to walk the stands, and I sell hot dogs. And in my first month, I sell 10,000 hot dogs at $5 each, and I make 50 grand. And the cost of goods sold on those hot dogs was $250. So now I have a 100% unit profit margin. Wow. I can go ahead and I can pay off my investments, the hot dog cart. I can pay off the fee to the New York Yankees. And now I'm going to be seeing 25 grand clear on every cart I have. At least that's how it appears. So what do I do? Well, I could say I'm going to go out and saturate the stadium. But maybe I say there's demand beyond the stadium and I'm going to go out into the city. Okay? And so, but I'm not sure how much is needed for the city. The city's never eaten hot dogs before, and I know there is demand, but I'm not sure. And I have some taste of demand, but my demand's in a very specific area, a ballpark where everybody likes to eat hot dogs. And so you could say I could just saturate the ballpark, but then I'm like, nobody else is in the rest of the city. And I know these other guys over here just saw how much money I made, and they're going to be building too. They're buying hot dog carts. And so maybe I go out and I order 10,000 hot dog carts. Well, now I have a problem if these guys go out and buy 5,000 hot dog carts. We saturate the ball field, and outside the ball field, not many people like hot dogs. Okay? But you don't know is the problem. Because this isn't hot dogs. Nobody really knows on this. There is no way to really know. But what you do know is that if you don't do anything, like I said before, and everybody, of course, is going to look back in hindsight and say, boy, you're a moron. You didn't prepare for this. When AI does come and it steals your entire product line. Okay? After spending 50% to build a data center, will they stop? It takes 3 to 4 years to build a data center. If they were to stop new data centers, they will have spent $1 trillion. That's just talking about their dollars. I don't know what to say. Did you just hear everything I said? They're looking at the future. They're building out. They could actually use this right now as it is. So this is where we're at. This is where we're at. And I want to be crystal clear. A lot of what I said today does not apply to the frontier AI labs. My position where I try to hammer it in December and I got so much hate, a lot of people are mad at me. AI is not a bubble. OpenAI and Anthropic absolutely could be bubbles, but AI is not a bubble. AI is going to be around whether you like it or not. AGI will come. Well, I shouldn't say that. We don't know about that. I believe it will come, but nobody knows. Even Zuckerberg said it could be 5 years, it could be 10, maybe it's 20, but it will come. But the thing that we do know is that this technology is already showing it's like nothing else we've seen. So nobody really knows how to project for it. But what we do know is that nobody wants to get caught sitting on their hands. And it's not just America. Over in China, as I keep saying to you, with their central planning, which I think has had amazing results. If you think AI is a bust, then go tell China's central planners that. Because they have been planning for this now. And then last year when they released their 5-year vision, it was like their key points were all on AI. How they want to turn it, deliver the value to the people, the small businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is, if you believe the Ed Zitron, then why would China, who arguably has the best central planning in the world, the smartest central planning in the world, why would they be buying into the lie too? Are they a bunch of suckers? Is Ed the only one on earth who's right and everybody else, all the central planners in China, why would all of the smartest AI developers that come from China, right? Why would they be going into AI if it's going to be a bust, right? Why wouldn't China and Beijing deploy their resources somewhere else and tell people, stop going into AI. Ed Zitron says it's going to be a bust. There's nothing there. Hey guys, Ed Zitron over there. This guy on YouTube. There's nothing there. No, they're taking their best and their brightest and they're putting them into AI. Absolutely. Putting everyone they can into it. As Jensen Huang said, over 50% of the world's top AI researchers come from China. You think that's a coincidence? You think that's a sign that they don't believe in AI? So I just want to make this crystal clear. If you believe in Ed, then you think China is an idiot too. Don't pretend like, oh, I'm on China's side, but I believe in Ed. No. Because China is right there with America. They know that when this comes, this is going to be like nothing we've ever seen before. The only thing that's going to outstrip this is quantum. That's it. Okay? That's it. So that's what I got for you guys today. You're in a very, I mean, I don't want to say this in a bad way. But of all the things you can bet against, this wouldn't be the one that I would bet against. And I'm not saying that there won't be casualties. Absolutely, there could be casualties. Even if AI comes, there could be casualties. I've stated many times, why does anybody want to compete with Google in the consumer space? What a losing battle you're in for in the consumer space, okay? Going against a company that has infinite resources and has already captured a majority of Earth. Good luck. So absolutely, there will be casualties in the space, but AI is going absolutely nowhere. Okay, that's what I got for you guys. Have a great day.